the worn silver pendant hanging from 5-year-old. Ellie's neck caught Miss Sarah Bennet's eye during morning circle time. It was a delicate half-heart with jagged edges and a tiny engraved swallow that made her blood run cold. Sarah's trembling. Fingers instinctively reached for the identical pendant hidden beneath her own blouse, the other half of a hole that was broken 20 years ago, on the night she lost everything. As the children's laughter faded into the background, Sarah stared at the little girl with the familiar hazel eyes and gentle smile. Memories flooded back of the baby sister she was forced to leave behind when their parents died and the foster system tore them apart. Could this child somehow be connected to the family she'd spent 2 decades searching for, or was the universe playing a cruel trick on her heart? What shocking truth will Sarah discover when she finally asks Ellie where the pendant came from? Like and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories of lost connections and second chances. Share your own experiences with unexpected reunions in the comments below. We'd love to hear how fate brought someone special back into your life. Sarah couldn't focus for the rest of the day. Her mind kept drifting to that fateful night 20 years ago when everything changed. It had been a regular Thursday evening. 12-year-old Sarah had been babysitting her 2-year-old sister, Emma, while their parents attended a charity dinner. The doorbell rang just after midnight. 2 police officers stood on the porch, their expressions somber. Black ice on the highway, a truck driver who couldn't stop in time. No survivors. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and strangers in suits making decisions about their lives. Relatives they barely knew argued over who would take them in, but nobody wanted both girls. "It's too much responsibility," they'd say, not realizing Sarah could hear them from the next room. "I promise I'll find you," Sarah had whispered to Emma as they sat in the sterile waiting room of social services. The toddler couldn't understand what was happening, but she clung to her big sister, tiny fingers wrapped tightly around Sarah's shirt. "We need to separate them," the social worker had said to her supervisor, thinking Sarah couldn't hear. "We have a couple interested in the little one, but not the older girl," Sarah had begged and pleaded. "Please don't take her away. She's all I have left." The night before they were separated, their temporary guardian, Mrs. Wilson, had given them each a gift. "So you'll always remember each other," she'd said, handing them a silver heart pendant on a chain. She broke it in 2 right along its jagged design. "One half for Sarah, one half for Emma. Look," Mrs. Wilson had explained. "See how they fit together, just like you two. And see this little bird? It's a swallow. They always find their way home, no matter how far they travel." The next morning, Emma was gone before Sarah woke up. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Just a system that saw them as case numbers rather than sisters who needed each other. Sarah bounced between foster homes until she aged out of the system at 18. Some were decent, others unbearable, but none were home. Throughout it all, she never removed the pendant. It was her connection to Emma, her promise, she tried to find. Her sister over the years. As soon as she turned 18, Sarah had requested her files, only to discover that Emma's adoption had been sealed by court order. The adoptive parents had changed her name, moved out of state. Dead ends at every turn. Sarah had hired private investigators, joined adoption search groups, and submitted her DNA to every genetic database available. Nothing. It was as if Emma had vanished into thin air. After college, Sarah had chosen to become a kindergarten teacher. She told herself it was because she loved children, which was true. But deep down, she knew part of her was drawn to 5-year-olds, because that was the age Emma had been when she last would have seen her. If she had found her in time. Every year, Sarah scanned the faces of her new students, wondering if any of them might be related to Emma. She knew it was irrational. The odds were astronomical. But she couldn't help herself, until today. It had never happened. Until today, the pendant had remained just a painful reminder of a promise unfulfilled. Sarah finally dismissed her class, watching as Ellie skipped toward the door with the other children. The pendant bounced against her chest, catching the afternoon sunlight. It couldn't be a coincidence. That design was custom made, Mrs. Wilson had told her so. But how had it found its way to this child? And those eyes so like her own, so like her mother's. Sarah packed up her classroom materials with shaking hands. She needed answers, but she also needed to be careful. If Ellie was somehow connected to Emma, Sarah couldn't bear to lose her again. But first, she needed proof. She needed to know for certain before she opened those old wounds again. Sarah had been teaching at Oak Ridge Elementary for 7 years. She loved her job, loved nurturing young minds and watching her students blossom over the course of the school year. Her classroom was a sanctuary of creativity and warmth, with colorful artwork covering the walls and reading nooks filled with plush pillows. Principal Martinez often said Sarah had a special gift with the children. "You have instincts," he'd told her during her last evaluation. "You connect with them on their level." What he didn't know was that Sarah's connection came from the part of her that remained perpetually searching. Forever a 12-year-old girl looking for her baby sister, Ellie Parker had arrived at Oak Ridge just 2 weeks ago, mid-October, after moving to town with her aunt. Sarah remembered the day clearly. The little girl had stood in the doorway, clutching her aunt's hand, uncertainty written across her face. "Class, we have a new friend joining us today," Sarah had announced. "This is Ellie. Can we all say good morning to Ellie?" The children had chorused their greetings, and Ellie had given a shy wave in return. Sarah had shown her to an empty seat at the blue table, introducing her to Mason and Lily, who immediately offered to share their crayons. Something about Ellie had struck Sarah from the beginning, even before she'd noticed the pendant, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, the slight furrow between her brows when she was thinking hard. Small mannerisms that reminded Sarah of someone, though. She couldn't place who. Ellie was quiet but bright. Her drawings showed attention to detail unusual for a 5-year-old. She was particularly fond of birds, filling her art paper with colorful wings and beaks. When Sarah had commented on this, Ellie explained that her mother had loved birds. "She's in heaven now," Ellie had said matter-of-factly. "Auntie Diane says she's watching over me like a bird in the sky." Sarah had felt a pang at this revelation. "I'm sorry about your mom, Ellie. It's okay. I was little when she went away. I don't remember her much, but I have her special necklace." Ellie had pulled out the pendant then, but Sarah hadn't noticed. "It's designed until today. Now, in the empty classroom, Sarah pulled out Ellie's enrollment file. The paperwork listed Diane Parker as her legal guardian, mother deceased Catherine Parker. Father unknown, Catherine Parker. The name meant nothing to Sarah. If her sister had been adopted, she would have been given a new name. But the pendant, there couldn't be two identical custom-made pieces like that. Sarah picked up her phone and hesitated. She could call Diane Parker right now, request a meeting, but what would she say? "I think your niece might be my long-lost sister's daughter." It sounded crazy, even to her. Instead, she decided to observe Ellie more carefully first, gather more information. If there was a connection, she needed to approach this delicately. A child's well-being was at stake. The next morning, Sarah arrived at school early. She arranged a special activity that would allow her to interact more directly with Ellie's small reading groups, where she could observe the girl up close. When the children arrived, Sarah found herself studying Ellie's features with new awareness. The shape of her ears slightly pointed at the tips, just like Sarah's, just like their mother's. the dimple in her right cheek that appeared when she smiled. Even the way she wrinkled her nose when laughing seemed eerily familiar during reading. Sarah sat beside Ellie, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo as the child sounded out words. Sarah noticed a small birthmark on Ellie's wrist, a tiny crescent moon shape. Her heart skipped. Emma had had that same birthmark dot at recess. Sarah watched from the sidelines as Ellie played on the swings. The pendant slipped out from under her shirt, catching the sunlight. Sarah touched her own pendant through her blouse. Two halves of a whole, separated for 20 years, somehow finding their way back to each other. She couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. Somehow, this child was connected to her past. The question was how? If Catherine Parker was indeed Emma, why hadn't Sarah's searches found her? And if Ellie was Emma's daughter, that would make her Sarah's niece. The thought was overwhelming. Sarah had spent so long searching for a sister that she'd never considered she might find the next generation instead. By the end of the day, Sarah had made her decision. She would request a meeting with Diane Parker. It was time to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Sarah arranged the parent-teacher conference for Thursday afternoon. She told Principal Martinez it was to discuss Ellie's adjustment to the new school environment, which wasn't entirely untrue. The waiting was excruciating every time she looked at Ellie during class. More questions flooded her mind. When Thursday finally arrived, Sarah found herself rearranging the chairs in her classroom repeatedly, her nerves getting the better of her. She'd chosen her outfit carefully that morning, a blue blouse that matched her eyes, the same shade as her mother's. As Emma's would have been at 3:45, there was a knock at the classroom door. Sarah took a deep breath and opened it. Double quotes, Miss Bennett. I'm Diane Parker, Ellie's aunt. Sarah froze. The woman standing before her was in her early 40s, with auburn hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But it was her face that made Sarah's breath catch. The resemblance to Sarah's mother was subtle but unmistakable. The same high cheekbones, the same shape to her eyes, though Diane's were brown instead of blue. Please come in, Sarah managed, extending her hand. Thank you for coming. Diane's hand was firm. Of course. I'm eager to hear how Ellie's doing. She talks about your class constantly. They sat at the small conference table in the corner of the classroom. Sarah had prepared a folder with samples of Ellie's work, which she opened mechanically while her mind raced. Ellie's adjusting beautifully, Sarah began, slipping into her professional role. She's bright, creative, and getting along well with the other children. Her reading skills are above average for her age. Diane smiled proudly. That's wonderful to hear. Her mother was a reader, too. Always had her nose in a book. Sarah's heart quickened. You mentioned Ellie lost her mother recently. Diane's expression softened with sadness. Yes, Catherine, my cousin, passed away 6 months ago. Cancer. It was quick, which was a mercy, but hard on Ellie. Cousin, not sister. Sarah's theory faltered. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, genuinely moved by the pain in Diane's eyes. It must be a difficult adjustment for both of you. It is. Catherine and I were close growing up. When she got sick, there was never any question that I'd take care of Ellie. Diane twisted a tissue in her hands. Catherine was adopted, never knew her birth family. I think that's why our connection was so important to her. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Adopted. How old was she when she was adopted? The question slipped out before Sarah could stop herself. If Diane found the question odd, she didn't show it. Very young. 2 or 3, I think. My aunt and uncle couldn't have children, and Catherine was their miracle. They moved to Colorado right after the adoption, which is where we all grew up. 2 or 3, the age Emma had been. And Ellie's father? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Not in the picture, Diane said firmly. Catherine made some poor choices in her early 20s. She never told anyone who Ellie's father was, and we respected that decision. Sarah nodded, struggling to maintain her professional demeanor while her personal world tilted on its axis. I noticed Ellie wears a beautiful pendant. It's quite unique. Diane's expression brightened. Yes, the silver half-heart. It was Catherine's. The only thing she had from her birth family, apparently. She wore it every day of her life and gave it to Ellie before she passed. Told her it would keep her safe, that it was her connection to where she came from. She paused. I thought it was a bit heavy for a 5-year-old to understand, but Ellie treasures it. Sarah's hand involuntarily moved to her chest, where her own pendant lay hidden. Miss Bennet, are you all right? Diane leaned forward, concern in her eyes. You've gone quite pale. I'm fine, Sarah assured her quickly. Just ... reminded of something. Ellie mentioned her mother loved birds. Oh yes, Diane laughed, especially swallows. She had this whole thing about them representing hope and homecoming. She even had a small swallow tattooed on her wrist when she turned 18. Sarah felt dizzy. A swallow like the one engraved on both halves of the pendant. Miss Bennet, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is this meeting really about Ellie's adjustment? You seem ... distracted. Sarah realized she'd been silent too long. I apologize. Ellie is doing wonderfully in class. I just wanted to make sure she had the support she needed after such a significant loss. It wasn't a lie, not really. Diane seemed to accept this. That's thoughtful of you. We're doing our best. Some days are harder than others, but Ellie is resilient. As the meeting concluded and Diane prepared to leave, Sarah made a split-second decision. Miss Parker, would it be possible for me to see a photo of Catherine sometime? I find it helps to understand my students better when I can picture their families. If Diane found the request unusual, she hid it well. Of course, I have some on my phone. She scrolled through her gallery and turned the screen toward Sarah. This was last Christmas before she got sick. Sarah stared at the image of a woman with long dark hair and a bright smile, her arm around a beaming Ellie, the woman's eyes bright blue, just like Sarah's, just like their mother's gazed back at her from the screen, and they're visible at. Her neck was the silver half-heart pendant that now belonged to Ellie. Sarah sat in her apartment that evening, surrounded by photographs spread across her coffee table. Photos of her parents, of herself as a child, and the few precious images she had of Emma as a toddler. She held her phone next to a family portrait. Comparing the face of Catherine Parker to the memories of her own family, the resemblance was undeniable. Catherine had their mother's eyes, their father's smile. Even the way she tilted her head in the photo, it was a Bennet family trait. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for her pendant. All these years searching, and Emma Catherine had been in Colorado. All these years hoping, and her sister had lived a life, had a daughter, and died without ever knowing Sarah was looking for her. Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks. She'd been too late. 20 years of searching, and she'd found her sister only after death had taken her away again. But Ellie remained. Ellie with the matching pendant. Ellie with the Bennet eyes and dimple. Ellie, her niece. Sarah reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. Rebecca. It's Sarah. I need to talk to someone. Rebecca Chen had been Sarah's friend since college, a fellow teacher who now taught 3rd grade at Oak Ridge. She was the only person who knew the full story of Sarah's search for her sister. Come over, Rebecca said without hesitation. I'll open the wine. An hour later, Sarah sat on Rebecca's couch, having poured out the entire story, the pendant, the meeting with Diane, the photograph of Catherine. Oh, Sarah. Rebecca's eyes were wide. Are you certain? I mean, absolutely certain. As certain as I can be without DNA proof, Sarah replied, twisting her pendant between her fingers. The timing fits. The pendant is identical. The resemblance is unmistakable. What are you going to do? Rebecca asked, refilling their glasses. That was the question that had been haunting Sarah since the moment she'd seen Ellie's pendant. Don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to tell Diane everything immediately to claim Ellie as family. But another part, is afraid. Rebecca finished for her. Sarah nodded. What if I'm wrong? What if it's all a massive coincidence? I'd look unhinged, some teacher claiming to be her dead cousin's long-lost sister. And if you're right, then I found my niece. Sarah's voice broke. The only family I have left in the world. Rebecca took Sarah's hand. This isn't just about you, though. It's about Ellie, too. She's already lost her mother. She's adjusting to living with her aunt. How would this revelation affect her? It was the question that had been tormenting Sarah most of all. As a teacher, she was trained to put children's welfare first. What was best for Ellie in this situation? I could disrupt her life completely, Sarah whispered. Or I could give her a connection to her mother that no one else can provide. You need to be certain before you say anything, Rebecca advised, and you need to approach this carefully. Diane is Ellie's legal guardian. She might not welcome your sudden appearance in their lives. Sarah thought of Diane's protective nature, the way she'd spoken about Catherine and Ellie. She loves Ellie, that was clear. Then respect that relationship, Rebecca said. If you decide to pursue this, do it in a way that puts Ellie's needs first and acknowledges Diane's place in her life. Sarah nodded slowly. I need more information. I need to be absolutely sure before I say anything. How will you get proof? Rebecca asked. I still have contacts from my years of searching, Sarah replied. People who helped me navigate the adoption system. I'll start there, see if I can access Catherine's adoption records. And until then, I continue being Ellie's teacher, Sarah said firmly. I don't treat her differently. I don't confuse her or overwhelm her. I just observe, maybe learn more about Catherine through natural conversations with Ellie. Rebecca looked concerned. Can you separate your roles like that? Teacher versus potential aunt? It was a fair question. Sarah had always prided herself on her professionalism, but this situation was unprecedented. I have to, she said finally. For Ellie's sake. Later that night, back in her apartment, Sarah stood before the mirror in her bathroom. She removed her pendant, really studying it in a way she hadn't done in years. The jagged edge where it had been broken, the tiny swallow etched into the silver. She thought of Catherine, growing up in Colorado, never knowing her birth family, but keeping the pendant as a connection to her past. Had she wondered about her origins? Had she tried to find Sarah too? An innocent Ellie who had no idea her teacher might be her aunt. Ellie who had already faced too much loss for her young age. Whatever Sarah decided, she knew one thing. For certain, she couldn't lose them both. She'd missed the chance to reunite with her sister, but perhaps fate had given her another opportunity through Ellie. I found you, she whispered to her reflection, clutching the pendant tightly. After all this time, I found you. The weekend gave Sarah time to launch her investigation. She started by contacting Janet Mercer, a social worker who had helped her navigate the adoption system during her previous searches. It's a long shot after all this time, Janet warned during their phone call. Adoption records from that era are sealed, especially interstate adoptions, but not impossible. Sarah pressed at Janet's side. Not impossible. I still have connections in Colorado. Let me see what I can find out about a Catherine Parker, adopted around 2000-2001. While waiting for Janet's information, Sarah turned to her laptop. She had already tried searching for Catherine Parker numerous times since meeting with Diane, but with little success. There wasn't much of a digital footprint, no social media accounts, minimal public records. She did find an obituary from 6 months earlier in a Colorado newspaper. Catherine Ann Parker, 22, passed away after a brief illness. She is survived by her daughter Eleanor and cousin Diane Parker. The brevity of it broke Sarah's heart. 22 years Emma had lived only 22 years. The timing aligned perfectly. Emma would have been 22 now if she were alive. She would have been around 17 when Ellie was born. Sarah's phone rang late Sunday evening. It was Janet. "I found something," she said without preamble. A Catherine Ann Parker was adopted by Robert and Margaret Parker in Denver, Colorado. In December 2000, the birth name listed is Emma Grace Bennett. Sarah sank onto her couch, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "It's her," she whispered. "It's really her." "There's more," Janet continued. "I've located her adoption file. The birth parents are listed as James and Carolyn Bennett, deceased. There's a note about a sibling, Sarah Bennett, age 12 at time of adoption, not included in the placement." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. It was all there in black and white, the proof she had sought for 20 years. "How did I never find her?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "I looked everywhere. Interstate adoption, sealed records, name change," Janet listed. "And from what I can see, the Parkers moved around quite a bit. Colorado, Wyoming, back to Colorado. It would have been like finding a needle in a haystack." Sarah wiped her eyes. "Can you tell me anything else about her life?" "Not much from these records," Janet admitted. "But I did find her death certificate. Cause of death was acute lymphoblastic leukemia. She was diagnosed and died within 3 months." Another wave of grief washed over Sarah. Her sister had faced a devastating illness without her, had died without Sarah ever getting to say hello again, let alone goodbye. "What about Ellie's birth certificate?" Sarah asked. "Eleanor Grace Parker, born May 18th, 2019, Janet read. "Mother, Catherine Ann Parker. Father, not listed." "She used her mother's middle name for Ellie," Sarah noted, fresh tears welling. "Grace." "Sarah," Janet said gently, "what are you going to do with this information?" It was the question Sarah had been wrestling with since she first recognized the pendant. Now that she had confirmation, the path forward seemed both clearer and more complicated. "I need to tell Diane," she said finally. "And eventually, Ellie, they deserve to know the truth." "Proceed carefully," Janet advised. "Remember that Diane is Ellie's legal guardian. She may not welcome this revelation." After thanking Janet for her help, Sarah spent the rest of the evening compiling what she learned. She created a folder with copies of the documents Janet had sent, photos of her family, and a timeline of events. If she was going to approach Diane, she needed to be prepared. She also wrote a letter to Catherine to Emma pouring out 20 years of searching, 20 years of love and loss and hope. She wrote about their parents, about the night they were separated, about all the birthdays and Christmases she had marked without her sister. She wrote until her hand cramped and tears blurred the ink. A letter that would never be read by its intended recipient. When she finally crawled into bed, emotionally drained, Sarah clutched her pendant and whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't find you in time, Emma, but I promise I'll be there for your daughter." The next morning, Sarah arrived at school early, her mind still processing everything she had learned. Ellie wasn't just a student anymore, she was family. The last connection to the sister Sarah had lost twice over Dot as she prepared her classroom. Sarah resolved to maintain her professional boundaries while at school. Ellie deserved consistency and stability, especially now. But Sarah also knew she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. Sooner or later, she would need to have a very difficult conversation with Diane Parker. The children began arriving, hanging up their backpacks and finding their seats. Sarah greeted each one with a smile, saving a special one for Ellie when she skipped in, her pendant bouncing against her chest. "Good morning, Miss Bennet," Ellie chirped. "I drew a picture for you last night. It's a swallow, like on my necklace." Sarah accepted the drawing, her heart overflowing with emotion she carefully kept from her face. "It's beautiful, Ellie. Thank you. Would you like to tell me more about your necklace sometime?" Ellie nodded enthusiastically. "My mommy gave it to me before she went to heaven. She said it was magic and would help me find my way home if I got lost." "That sounds very special," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the storm of feelings. Inside, "I think your mommy was very wise." As Ellie joined her classmates on the reading rug, Sarah touched her own pendant beneath her blouse. Two halves of a whole, guiding them back to each other after 20 years apart. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah found herself drawn to Ellie like a magnet. She was careful not to show favoritism in class, but she created opportunities for one-on-one interactions, reading sessions, art projects, gentle questions about Ellie's life and memories. "Miss Bennet, look," Ellie called one afternoon during art time. "I made a family of birds." Sarah knelt beside Ellie's desk to examine the colorful construction paper creation. 3 birds, 1 large blue one, 1 medium-sized purple one, and 1 tiny yellow one flew across the page. "They're beautiful, Ellie," Sarah said. "Who are they?" "This big one is Auntie Diane," Ellie explained, pointing. "And this one is me, and this one—" Her finger hovered over the bluebird. "This is my mommy watching over us from heaven." Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm sure she is." "Mommy loved blue," Ellie continued, carefully adding details. "To the bluebird's wings. She said it was the color of the sky and the ocean and forever." "That's a lovely thought," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Blue had been their mother's favorite color, too. "Do you have a favorite color, Miss Bennet?" "Blue," Sarah answered truthfully, "just like your mommy." Ellie beamed at this connection. "Auntie Diane says I look like my mommy, but I have my daddy's smile." Sarah froze. "Did you know your daddy?" Ellie shook her head, returning to her artwork. "No, Mommy said he was just a shooting star here and gone really fast. But she said that was okay because she had me instead, and I was better than all the stars in the sky." Sarah's heart ached for her. Catherine for Emma raising a child alone so young. She wondered about Ellie's father, this unknown man who had contributed half of Ellie's DNA and then vanished from her life. "Auntie Diane has a picture of my mommy holding me when I was a baby," Ellie continued, unaware of Sarah's emotional turmoil. "She's smiling really big, and I'm wrapped in a yellow blanket." "That sounds like a special picture," Sarah managed. "It is. Sometimes I look at it when I miss her really much." Ellie put down her scissors and looked up at Sarah with solemn eyes. "Do you miss people sometimes, Miss Bennet?" The question, so innocent yet so profound, nearly undid Sarah completely. "Yes, Ellie, I miss people too. I miss my parents, and dot. She hesitated. "And my sister." "Where is your sister?" Ellie asked. "She's gone, like your mommy," Sarah said softly. "But I like to think she's watching over me too." Ellie nodded, accepting this with the straightforward understanding of childhood. "Maybe your sister and my mommy are friends in heaven." Sarah blinked back tears. "Maybe they are." Later that week, during indoor recess on a rainy day, Ellie approached Sarah's desk with a book about birds. "Can you read this with me, Miss Bennet? I'm trying to find what kind of bird is on my necklace." Sarah patted the chair next to her. "Of course." As they flipped through the pages, Sarah could feel the weight of Ellie's pendant against her own chest, hidden beneath her blouse. She wondered what Ellie would think if she knew the truth, that her teacher wore the matching piece to her most treasured possession. "There it is," Ellie exclaimed, pointing to a page about swallows. "That's the bird on my necklace." Sarah read the passage aloud. Swallows are known for their incredible homing abilities. They migrate thousands of miles each year, but always return to the same nesting sites. In many cultures, swallows symbolize loyalty, love, and the promise of return. That's why Mommy loved them, Ellie said with certainty, because they always come home. I think you're right, Sarah agreed, her throat tight with emotion. Ellie touched the picture of the swallow thoughtfully. Miss Bennet, do you have a necklace? Two? I see you touching your neck sometimes, like there's something there. The question caught Sarah off guard. I do have a special necklace, she admitted. It's very important to me. Can I see it? Ellie asked eagerly. Sarah hesitated. It wasn't time yet not before she'd spoken to Diane. Someday, she promised. But not today. Ellie accepted this with a shrug, already distracted by a colorful illustration of a hummingbird on the next page. The following Monday, Ellie brought a small photo album to school for show and tell. When her turn came, she stood proudly before the class. This is my special book of my mommy, she announced, opening to the first page. This is her holding me when I was born, and this is us at the zoo with the penguins. And this is at Christmas with Auntie Diane. Sarah stood at the back of the circle, her heart pounding as she glimpsed these snapshots of Catherine's life, of Emma's life. A life she should have shared but had missed entirely. After school, when the other children had left, Ellie lingered at her cubby, slowly packing her things. Did you like my pictures, Miss Bennet? She asked. Sarah knelt down to Ellie's level. I love them, Ellie. Your mommy looks like she was a wonderful person. She was the best mommy, Ellie declared with absolute certainty. Then, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret, she added, sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. Is that bad? No, sweetheart, Sarah assured her, resisting the urge to pull her into a hug. That happens, but you'll always remember how much she loved you. Ellie nodded solemnly. Auntie Diane says love doesn't go away, even when people do. Your Auntie Diane is very wise, Sarah said, meaning it. As Ellie skipped away to meet Diane. In the pickup line, Sarah remained kneeling on the classroom floor, overwhelmed by the growing connection to this child, her niece, and the weight of the truth she carried. Sarah spent a sleepless night staring at her ceiling, her pendant clutched in her hand. The time had come to make a decision. Nearly a month had passed since she'd first noticed Ellie's pendant. 3 weeks since she'd confirmed that Catherine Parker had been her sister, Emma. Every day that passed felt like another day of deception, of keeping the truth from those who deserved to know it. By morning, Sarah had made up her mind. She would tell Diane everything. At school, she left a message for Diane requesting another meeting. It's a personal matter, she explained when the school secretary raised an eyebrow. Nothing to do with Ellie's academic progress. Before she could move forward, however, Sarah needed professional advice. During her lunch break, she called Dr. Lydia Martinez, a child psychologist she'd met through educational conferences and had since become friends with. I need your expertise, Sarah explained after sharing the bare outlines of the situation. How do you tell a 5-year-old something like this? Or should I even tell her at all? Children are remarkably resilient, Lydia replied after a thoughtful pause. But they also need stability and consistency, especially after trauma like losing a parent. If you decide to reveal this connection, it needs to be done with Ellie's emotional well-being as the absolute priority. I would never want to confuse or upset her, Sarah assured her friend. Then proceed cautiously, Lydia advised. Start with the adult guardian, Diane, you said. She needs to be fully on board before Ellie learns anything. And when you do tell, Ellie, use simple, concrete language. Children her age don't understand complex family relationships the way adults do. What if Diane rejects the idea completely? What if she doesn't believe me? Lydia's voice was gentle but firm. Then you need to respect her decision, at least for now. She is Ellie's legal guardian. Pushing too hard could result in her cutting contact entirely, which wouldn't serve anyone's interests. After thanking Lydia for her counsel, Sarah spent the afternoon in a fog, going through the motions of teaching while her mind rehearsed different versions of the conversation she would have with Diane Parker. That evening, she received a text message. "This is Diane Parker. I can meet tomorrow after school. Is everything okay with Ellie?" Sarah responded quickly. "Ellie is fine. Thank you for meeting with me. It's a personal matter I need to discuss." The next day dragged endlessly. Sarah kept catching herself staring at Ellie, memorizing her features as if the child might disappear at any moment. When the final bell rang, she sent the students home with perhaps more haste than usual. Her nerves strung tight as she waited for Diane to arrive at exactly 3:45. There was a knock at the classroom door. Diane Parker entered, concern evident on her face. "Miss Bennett? Your message sounded serious." "Please, call me Sarah," she replied, gesturing to the conference table. "And yes, it is serious, but not in the way you might think. Please sit down." Diane sat cautiously, her posture tense. "What's this about?" Sarah took a deep breath. "What I'm about to tell you may sound unbelievable, but I ask that you hear me out completely." She reached into her desk drawer and removed the folder she had prepared. "It's about Catherine and about me." "I don't understand," Diane frowned. With trembling hands, Sarah unclasped her necklace and placed the silver half-heart pendant on the table between them. 20 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. My 2-year-old sister and I were separated by the foster care system. Before we were separated, we were given matching pendants, 2 halves of a whole heart with a swallow engraved on each. I never saw my sister again. Sarah pushed the pendant toward Diane until I saw Ellie wearing the other half. Diane stared at the pendant, her face a mask of shock. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My sister's name was Emma Grace Bennett," Sarah continued, opening the folder to show Diane the documents Janet had provided. "She was adopted by Robert and Margaret Parker in December 2000. They changed her name to Catherine Ann Parker." Diane's hands shook as she picked up the adoption record. "How did you get this?" "I've been searching for my sister for 20 years, Sarah explained. "I have contacts in social services who helped me confirm what I suspected when I first saw Ellie's pendant. This is too much," Diane said, her voice rising slightly. "You're claiming to be Catherine's long-lost sister, based on a similar necklace?" "Not similar," Sarah corrected gently. "Identical, custom-made, broken in 2. And not just the necklace. Look at these photos." She laid out family photos, her parents' wedding picture, a family portrait taken shortly. Before the accident, a photo of toddler Emma with her mother. Diane's breath caught as she looked at the images. The resemblance between Catherine and Carolyn Bennett was undeniable. "She had your mother's eyes," Diane said softly. "I always wondered where she got that color blue. My aunt and uncle both had brown eyes." "Our mother's eyes," Sarah confirmed. "And now Ellie has them too." Diane looked up, suddenly suspicious. "What do you want? Why are you telling me this now?" It was the question Sarah had been dreading. "I don't want to disrupt your life or Ellie's. I'm not seeking custody or making demands. I just ... Her voice broke. "I searched for my sister for 20 years, only to find I was too late. But Ellie is my niece, my blood, my family. I just want the chance to know her, for her to know where she comes from. And if I say no," Diane's voice was quiet but firm, "if I decide this would be too confusing for Ellie right now," Sarah forced herself to speak the words that broke her heart, "then I would respect your decision. Ellie's well-being comes first, always." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of revelation heavy between them. "I need time," Diane finally said. "Time to process this, to think about what's best for Ellie." "Of course," Sarah nodded, though inside she was screaming with the fear that Diane would take Ellie and disappear from her life. Diane gathered the documents, her movements deliberate. "May I keep these to verify?" "Yes, I have copies." As Diane stood to leave, she paused, looking at Sarah with new eyes. Catherine always wondered where she came from. She used to make up stories about her birth family when she was young. I wish she could have known the truth." "So do I," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "More than anything." Diane nodded once, then left the classroom, taking with her Sarah's proof, her hope, and her fear. 3 days passed with no word from Diane. Each morning, Sarah watched anxiously as Ellie arrived at school, half expecting the child to be absent, taken away before Sarah could say goodbye. But each day, Ellie bounded into the classroom with her usual enthusiasm, pendant bouncing against her chest, completely unaware of the adults' turmoil. On Friday afternoon, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I need to be certain. Would you be willing to take a DNA test?" "Diane," Sarah's fingers trembled as she replied, "Absolutely. Whenever and however you want to arrange it." The response came quickly. "I've made appointments for tomorrow morning at City Life Medical Lab, 10 a.m. They can rush the results." Relief flooded through Sarah. Diane hadn't rejected the possibility outright. She was being cautious, protecting Ellie, but she was willing to investigate further. Saturday morning, Sarah arrived at the lab 15 minutes early, her nerves jangling. She spotted Diane in the waiting room and approached cautiously. "Thank you for doing this," Sarah said, taking a seat beside her. Diane nodded stiffly. "I need to be absolutely certain before I even consider telling Ellie anything. I understand completely." They sat in uncomfortable silence until a technician called Sarah's name. The process was quick: a simple cheek swab, some paperwork, a signed authorization for the results to be shared with Diane. "How long will it take?" Sarah asked the technician. "We can rush it, given the circumstances," she replied. 3 to 5 business days. Another week of waiting, of uncertainty. Sarah wasn't sure how she would endure it. As they left the lab, Diane turned to Sarah in the parking lot. "I've been thinking about what you told me, looking at old photos of Catherine, of my aunt and uncle. There were always questions." "What kind of questions?" Sarah asked carefully. "Catherine looked nothing like my aunt and uncle. They explained it away, random genetics from distant relatives. But she was different in other ways too, more intense, more creative. She had this way of tilting her head when she was thinking." Diane's voice trailed off. "Like this?" Sarah demonstrated the gesture, a slight inclination to the right, brow furrowed. Diane's eyes widened. "Yes, exactly like that. Ellie does it too." "It's a Bennett family trait," Sarah explained. "Our father did it. I do it. Emma Catherine did it when she was little." A silence stretched between them, less tense than before. "Would you like to get coffee?" Sarah suggested hesitantly. "I could tell you about our parents, about Emma as a little girl. And I'd love to hear more about Catherine growing up, if you're willing to share." Diane considered the offer, then nodded slowly. There's a cafe around the corner. For the next 2 hours, they sat across from each other, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness as they exchanged stories about the person they had both loved in different ways. Sarah learned about Catherine's childhood in Colorado, her passion for art, her rebellious teenage years. Diane heard about the Bennett family traditions, about baby Emma's first steps, about the parents she never had the chance to know. "She was so loved," Sarah said, wiping away tears. From the moment she was born, she was so deeply loved. The Parkers loved her too, Diane said softly, in their own way. They weren't very demonstrative people, but they gave her everything they could. I'm grateful for that, Sarah replied sincerely. I always feared she might have ended up in a bad situation. As they parted ways, Diane seemed less guarded. I'll call you when the results come in. The next week was the longest of Sarah's life. At school, she maintained her professional demeanor, but each interaction with Ellie felt charged with new significance. The child remained blissfully unaware of the adult's secret, chattering about birds and drawing pictures and proudly showing off new reading skills. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah's phone rang as she was packing up her classroom. Diane's number flashed on the screen. Hello? Sarah answered, heart pounding. The results came in. Diane's voice was unreadable, and Sarah couldn't breathe. 99.9% probability of a maternal half-aunt relationship to Eleanor Parker, Diane recited as if reading directly from the report. You are Ellie's aunt. Sarah sank into her chair, legs suddenly unable to support her. Thank you for telling me, she managed. I've been thinking about what this means, Diane continued. For Ellie, for us, I still believe it would be too much to tell her everything at once. She's only 5, and she's still processing Catherine's death. I agree, Sarah said quickly. Dr. Martinez, the child psychologist I consulted, said the same thing. Ellie's emotional well-being has to come first. There was a pause on the line, but Diane said finally, I do think she deserves to know her family, all of her family. If you're willing to take this slowly, on terms that prioritize Ellie's needs. Yes, Sarah breathed. Absolutely yes. Then I think we should meet. The 3 of us, outside of school. Perhaps you could come to our home this weekend. We can introduce you as a special friend of Catherine's to start with. A connection to her mother that Ellie didn't know about. It wasn't everything Sarah had hoped for, but it was a beginning. A chance to build a relationship with her niece, to honor the connection to her sister. I would be honored, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. After ending the call, Sarah stood alone in her classroom, overwhelmed by the moment. She removed her pendant and held it in her palm, the silver catching the late afternoon sunlight. For the first time in 20 years, the jagged edge didn't feel like a symbol of loss, but like a promise of reunion. We found our way home, she whispered to the tiny engraved swallow. Just like you said we would. Sarah stood on the doorstep of Diane's modest suburban home, a carefully wrapped package tucked under her arm. She had changed outfits 3 times that morning, finally settling on a casual blue dress that matched her eyes, the Bennett eyes. That Ellie had inherited. Diane opened the door before Sarah could knock. She's excited, she warned in a low voice. I told her we have a special visitor who knew her mother. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. They had agreed on this approach after consulting with Dr. Martinez, who had recommended starting with a simple connection to Catherine before introducing the more complex family relationship. Ms. Bennett, Ellie's delighted cry rang out as Sarah stepped into the living room. The child ran forward, stopping just short of a hug, suddenly shy outside the familiar context of the classroom. Hello, Ellie, Sarah smiled, kneeling to the child's level. It's nice to see you at your home. Ellie looked confused. But why are you here? Are you checking on my homework? Diane stepped in smoothly. Remember I told you we have a visitor who knew your mommy? Miss Bennett knew your mommy a long time ago. Ellie's eyes widened. You knew my mommy? Sarah's heart pounded. I did, she sighed carefully. But it was a very long time ago, when she was very little, like you. Come sit down, Diane directed, gesturing to the couch. I've made lemonade. The 3 settled in the living room, Ellie perched between the adults, vibrating. with curiosity. Did you and my mommy go to school together? Not exactly, Sarah replied, looking to Diane for guidance. They had discussed how much to reveal initially, but now that the moment was here, she found herself floundering. Diane gave a slight nod. Miss Bennet and your mommy have something very special in common, Ellie. Something I think you'll find interesting. Sarah reached for the small package she had brought. This might help explain. Would you like to open it? Ellie took the gift eagerly, tearing away the wrapping paper to reveal a velvet jewelry box. Inside was a framed photograph of two little girls, Sarah at about 10, holding a laughing toddler with bright blue eyes. That's me when I was a little girl, Sarah explained, pointing. And that little girl I'm holding, that's your mommy. Ellie stared at the photograph, her small fingers tracing the toddler's face. This is my mommy, but she's a baby. Everyone was a baby once, Diane said gently, even mommies. But how did you know her? Ellie persisted, looking up at Sarah with Bennet eyes that pierced straight to her heart. Sarah glanced at Diane, who nodded encouragingly. Ellie, Sarah began carefully, your mommy and I knew each other because we were sisters. Ellie's brow furrowed in confusion. Sisters? Like how Madison in my class has a big sister? Yes, exactly like that, Sarah confirmed. I was your mommy's big sister. Ellie looked to Diane for confirmation. Is that true, Auntie Diane? Miss Bennet was mommy's sister. It is true, Diane said softly. We just found out recently. Your mommy was adopted by my aunt and uncle when she was very little, and she lost touch with her birth family. But Ellie's face scrunched in concentration as she processed this new information. If you were my mommy's sister and I was my mommy's little girl, then what does that make you to me? The question hung in the air, the simple logic of a child cutting straight to the heart of the matter. That would make me your aunt, Sarah answered, her voice trembling slightly. Your mother's sister is your aunt, but Auntie Diane is my aunt. Ellie protested, confusion evident. You can have more than one aunt, Diane explained patiently. I'm your aunt because I'm your mommy's cousin. Miss Bennet is your aunt because she was your mommy's sister. Ellie considered this, her head tilted in that characteristic Bennet way. So I have two aunties now? If you want, Sarah said quickly, not wanting to presume. Only if you want. Ellie was quiet for a moment, looking back and forth between the two women. Then her gaze fell on Sarah's chest, where the outline of the pendant was visible beneath her dress. Your necklace, Ellie said suddenly. You said you had a special necklace. Can I see it now? Sarah's eyes met Diane's, who gave a small nod. Slowly, Sarah reached behind her neck and unclasped the chain. Drawing the silver half-heart out and holding it in her palm. Ellie gasped, her small hand flying to her own pendant. It's like mine. May I? Sarah asked, gesturing to Ellie's pendant. When the child nodded, Sarah gently took the two pieces and held them together. The jagged edges aligned perfectly, forming a complete heart with the swallow design now whole across both halves. They fit, Ellie exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. Yes, Sarah said softly. They belong together, just like families belong together. Your mommy and I were given these pendants when we were little girls, before we were separated. I've kept mine all these years, hoping someday I would find her again. And now you found me instead, Ellie said with the simple clarity of childhood. Sarah felt tears welling. Yes, Ellie, now I found you. Ellie was quiet for a moment, absorbing this revelation. Then she looked up at Sarah with solemn eyes. Did you know my grandma and grandpa too? My real ones, not Auntie Diane's aunt and uncle. I did, Sarah nodded. They were my parents too. They loved your mommy very much, just like she loved you. What were they like? Ellie asked, settling back against the couch cushions as if preparing for a story. Sarah looked to Diane, who smiled encouragingly. Why don't you tell her, Sarah? I think we could all use some lemonade while we talk. She stood and went to the kitchen, giving them a moment alone. As Ellie curled trustingly against her side, Sarah began sharing memories of the grandparents. The child had never known, the family heritage that had nearly been lost, and the sister she had loved and lost and found again through the miracle of the child. Beside her, the following weeks brought a careful dance as Sarah, Diane, and Ellie navigated their new relationship. Sarah began visiting the Parker home every Sunday afternoon, gradually becoming a regular presence in Ellie's life outside of school. "Can I call you Aunt Sarah now?" Ellie asked during their third Sunday visit, looking up from the puzzle they were working on together. Sarah's heart swelled. "I would like that very much, if it's okay with your Aunt Diane." Diane, who was reading in a nearby armchair, looked up. "Of course it's okay if that's what Ellie wants." "Aunt Sarah," Ellie repeated, testing the words. "I have two aunts now. Aunt Diane and Aunt Sarah." She seemed pleased with this arrangement, returning to the puzzle with renewed focus. For Sarah, these Sunday visits became the highlight of her week. She treasured watching Ellie in her home environment, seeing sides of her niece that weren't visible in the classroom. Ellie was more relaxed here, more talkative, eager to show Sarah her toys and books, and the special memory box where she kept treasures from her mother. "This was Mommy's," Ellie explained one afternoon, carefully removing a small blue glass bird from the box. "Aunt Diane gave it to me after Mommy went to heaven." "It's beautiful," Sarah said, gently touching the delicate figure. "Your mommy loved birds, didn't she?" "Especially swallows," Ellie nodded seriously. "Like on our necklaces." Sarah had brought photographs of her parents, Ella's grandparents, and stories of Catherine's early years as Emma. Ellie absorbed these new pieces of her history with a child's acceptance, weaving them seamlessly into her understanding of her mother. "Mommy had two names," she explained to her stuffed bear after one of Sarah's visits. "Emma when she was little and Catherine when she was big. And she had two families who loved her very much." While Ellie embraced the new relationship with innocent enthusiasm, things remained more complicated between Sarah and Diane. There was an undercurrent of tension, unspoken concerns about territory and authority. "She asked me if she could sleep over at your apartment sometime," Diane mentioned one evening after Ellie had gone to bed. Her tone was casual, but Sarah could hear the worry beneath it. "I told her that would be up to you," Sarah replied carefully. "I'm not trying to take her away, Diane. I hope you know that." Diane sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I know. It's just ... She's all I have left of Catherine, of my family, really. My parents live in Arizona and we're not close. She's all I have left too," Sarah said softly. "The last connection to my sister, to my parents. But she's yours, Diane. You've raised her, loved her, been there for her when Catherine couldn't be. I would never try to change that." A moment of understanding passed between them, two women united by their love for one little girl. "Maybe," Diane said slowly, "we could start with dinner at your place first. See how that goes before an overnight." It was an olive branch, a small step toward trust. "I'd like that," Sarah smiled. The first dinner at Sarah's apartment was a success. Ellie was delighted by the small space with its wall of bookshelves and window seat overlooking the park. Sarah had prepared Catherine's favorite childhood meal, macaroni and cheese with hot dogs cut into stars remembered from their early years together. "Mommy used to make this too," Ellie exclaimed, digging in with enthusiasm. Diane raised an eyebrow. "She did?" "She never made it for me." Some memories must have stayed with her, even if she didn't know where they came from. Sarah suggested as the weeks passed, a pattern emerged. Sunday afternoons at Diane's house, Thursday dinners at Sarah's apartment. Gradually, the initial awkwardness between the adults faded, replaced by a tentative friendship built on their shared love for Ellie. She has your laugh, Diane observed. One Sunday, as Ellie's giggles rang out from the backyard where she was chasing butterflies. I always wondered where that came from. Catherine had the same laugh. It would just bubble up from nowhere. Our father was like that. Sarah smiled at the memory. Mom used to say he could laugh in the middle of a hurricane. There were difficult moments, too. One Thursday evening, Ellie asked about her grandfather Diane's uncle, the man who had adopted. Catherine, was he my real grandpa? She asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. Sarah looked to Diane, unsure how to answer. He was your grandpa in all the ways that mattered, Diane said firmly. Just like I'm your real aunt, even though we found out Aunt Sarah is related to you by blood. Family isn't just about who has the same DNA, Ellie. It's about who loves you and takes care of you. Sarah nodded in agreement. Your Aunt Diane is absolutely right. Family comes in many different forms. It was the right answer, and Sarah felt a new respect for Diane's wisdom in navigating these complex waters. As October turned to November, the three of them settled into their new normal. At school, Sarah maintained professional boundaries, treating Ellie like any other student during class hours. But there was a special smile reserved for drop-off and pick-up times, a private understanding between them. We're like a secret club, Ellie whispered one morning as she hung up her backpack. Aunt Sarah at school and home. The arrangement wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, times when Diane seemed to pull back, protective of her relationship with Ellie. Sarah tried to be patient, to remember that Diane had been Ellie's only family for months after Catherine's death, that this adjustment was perhaps hardest for her. But slowly, surely, they were building something new together, a family pieced together from fragments, like the two halves of the silver pendant that had brought them together in the first place. The first hint of professional complications came in early December when Principal Martinez called Sarah into his office. Is everything all right with Ellie Parker? He asked, his expression concerned. Her aunt mentioned during the Thanksgiving potluck that you've been spending time with them outside of school. Sarah had been expecting this conversation eventually. In a small community like Oak Ridge Elementary, word traveled quickly. Yes, she confirmed. It's a unique situation. I've discovered that Ellie is actually my niece, my sister's daughter. My sister passed away earlier this year. Martinez's eyebrows shot up. That's unexpected, and you're certain of this relationship? We've confirmed it with DNA testing, Sarah explained. Diane Parker and I have been working together to integrate this new knowledge into Ellie's life gradually. The principal leaned back in his chair, processing this information. While I'm personally happy for you, Sarah, this does create some professional considerations. We have policies about teachers maintaining appropriate boundaries with students. And their families, I understand, Sarah nodded. I've been very careful to separate my roles as Ellie's teacher and her aunt. In the classroom, she's treated exactly the same as every other student. I don't doubt your intentions, Martinez said kindly, but perception matters in a school community. Other parents might question if Ellie receives special treatment, whether she actually does or not. It was a fair point, one that had worried Sarah as well. What do you suggest? Martinez steepled his fingers. We have Miss Chen's class next door with only 18 students. You have 22. Perhaps we could transfer Ellie to Miss Chen's class for the remainder of the school year. That would eliminate any potential conflict of interest. The suggestion made logical sense, but Sarah's heart sank at the thought of not seeing Ellie every day. Still, she knew that maintaining professional standards was important. If you think that's best, she agreed reluctantly. Let me speak with Miss Chen and then with Miss Parker, Martinez said. We'll handle this discreetly. 2 days later, the transfer was arranged. Diane had agreed it was the most appropriate solution, though she had consulted with Sarah first. It might actually be better for Ellie, Diane had reasoned during their phone call. She's getting confused sometimes about when you're Miss Bennet and when you're Aunt Sarah. This might help her separate those roles. Sarah knew they were right, but it didn't make the transition easier. On Ellie's last day in her class, Sarah maintained her composure until the final bell rang. Then, while the other children rushed out to the playground, Ellie lingered by her desk. Miss Chun is really nice, Sarah assured her, kneeling to straighten Ellie's backpack straps. And you'll make lots of new friends. But I'll still see you, right? Ellie asked, uncertainty clouding her eyes. You'll still be my Aunt Sarah at home? Always, Sarah promised, fighting back tears. Nothing will change that. We'll still have our Thursday dinners and Sunday visits. And you'll still be here at school, just in a different room? That's right. And you can wave to me in the hallway or at lunch. This seemed to satisfy Ellie, who nodded solemnly before wrapping her arms around Sarah in a quick hug. See you on Thursday, Aunt Sarah, she whispered, then skipped out to join the other children. Sarah remained kneeling on the classroom floor, her emotions overwhelming her once the child was gone. It was Rebecca who found her there, still fighting. Back tears. Martinez told me, Rebecca said, closing the classroom door and sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Sarah. Are you okay? I will be, Sarah managed. It's for the best, really, more professional. Rebecca put an arm around her friend's shoulders. It doesn't make it any easier, though. It's just Sarah's voice broke. I've spent 20 years searching for my sister, only to find I was too late. Now I found Ellie, and I have to step back again. Not stepping back, Rebecca corrected gently, just shifting roles. You're still her aunt. You still get to be part of her life. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. You're right. I know you're right. Besides, Rebecca added with a small smile, now I get to have the famous Ellie Parker in my class. She's quite the little artist, I hear. This drew a reluctant laugh from Sarah. She is. Takes after her mother. The next few weeks were an adjustment. Sarah found herself watching for glimpses of Ellie in the hallway or cafeteria, her heart lifting whenever the child spotted her and waved enthusiastically. It was a strange middle ground seeing Ellie at school but not having her in class. Then shifting to their closer relationship during their designated family times, other challenges emerged as well. Several parents had heard about the unusual situation, leading to curious glances and occasional questions during the holiday concert and classroom parties. Sarah maintained a professional demeanor, simply explaining that, yes, she had discovered a family connection to one of the students, and appropriate adjustments had been made to maintain professional boundaries. Most seemed satisfied with this explanation, though Mrs. Lopez, the PTA president, couldn't resist commenting. It's like something from a movie, isn't it? Finding your long-lost niece in your kindergarten class. What are the odds? The odds had indeed been astronomical, Sarah reflected later. Of all the schools in all the towns, Ellie had ended up in her classroom. The pendant had found its matching half across 20 years and thousands of miles. It seemed impossible, yet it had happened. A week before the winter break, Principal Martinez called Sarah into his office again. She went with a sense of dread, wondering if more complications had arisen. I've been observing the situation, he began, and speaking with Miss Chun about Ellie's adjustment to her new classroom. Is everything all right? Sarah asked anxiously. Everything is fine, he assured her. Ellie is thriving academically and socially. Miss Chun reports that she mentions her Aunt Sarah frequently, but doesn't seem confused about the boundaries anymore. Relief washed over Sarah. I'm glad to hear that. I wanted to discuss your teaching assignment for next year. Martinez continued. Normally, you'd move up to first grade with your current class. Sarah nodded. This was the standard rotation at Oak Ridge. Teachers stayed with the same group of children for kindergarten and first grade, providing continuity during those crucial early years. I'm wondering if you'd consider taking a new kindergarten class. Instead, Martinez suggested. That way, there would be no potential conflict with Ellie being in first grade. It was a reasonable solution, but one that would mean saying goodbye to the class she'd grown to love over the past months. Teaching was full of such goodbyes, of course, but they usually came with the satisfaction of seeing a full 2-year cycle completed. I'll need some time to think about it, Sarah said honestly. Martinez nodded understandingly. Of course. We have months before decisions need to be finalized. I just wanted to put the option on the table. As Sarah left his office, she found herself at a crossroads, both professionally and personally. The boundaries between her role as a teacher and her newly discovered role as Ellie's aunt would require ongoing navigation. There would be more difficult decisions ahead, more compromises to be made. But watching Ellie emerge from Miss Chun's classroom, her face lighting up when she spotted Sarah in the hallway, Sarah knew that any adjustments were worth it. This precious connection to her sister, this unexpected gift of family, was worth every complication. The week before Christmas, Sarah spent an entire evening carefully packing a wooden box she had found at an antique store. It was cedar, hand-carved, with delicate leaf patterns around the edges. Inside, she placed treasures from the Bennett family history, items she had carried with her through 20 years of searching. Waiting for the day she could share them with Emma, now they would go to Ellie instead. On Sunday afternoon, Sarah arrived at Diane's house with the box wrapped in simple silver paper. The house was transformed for the holiday season, a tree glittering in the front window and paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling. "Aunt Sarah," Ellie cried, running to the door. "We made cookies, come see." Sarah followed her niece to the kitchen where Diane was arranging star-shaped cookies on a cooling rack. The domestic scene warmed Sarah's heart. This was family, being created right before her eyes. "Perfect timing," Diane smiled. "They're just cool enough to decorate." For the next hour, the three of them covered the kitchen table with icing tubes, sprinkles, and edible glitter. Ellie took her cookie decoration very seriously, creating elaborate patterns with the concentration only a 5-year-old could muster. "This one is for you, Aunt Sarah," she said, pushing a blue frosted star toward her. "Blue is our special color." "Our special color," Sarah repeated, touched by the simple connection Ellie had established between them. After cookies and hot chocolate, they moved to the living room. Sarah placed the wrapped box beside her on the couch. "I brought something special today," she began. "Something I've been saving for a long time." Ellie's eyes widened with interest. "Is it a Christmas present?" "Sort of," Sarah smiled. "It's more like a family present. Something to help you know more about your mommy and where she came from, where you come from." Diane settled into a nearby armchair, watching curiously as Sarah placed the box in Ellie's lap. "Can I open it now?" Ellie asked, fingers already picking at the tape. "Yes, go ahead." The silver paper fell away, revealing the polished wooden box. Ellie ran her fingers over the carved design before carefully lifting the lid. "It's like my memory box for Mommy," she observed, peering at the contents. "That's right," Sarah nodded. "This is a memory box for our whole family, the Bennett family." One by one, Sarah helped Ellie remove and examine each item. There was a small album of photographs, Sarah and Emma as children, their parents on their wedding day, the house where they had once lived as a family. "That's my mommy?" Ellie asked, pointing to a toddler with bright eyes and a mischievous smile. Double quotes, "Yes, when she was about 2 years old," Sarah confirmed. "And that's me holding her. I was 12. "You were a big girl already," Ellie observed. Like Madison's sister who can drive a car. Not quite that big, Sarah laughed, but old. Enough to remember everything about our family. Next came a delicate pearl bracelet. This belonged to your grandmother, my mother, and your mommy's mother, Sarah explained. Her name was Carolyn Grace Bennett. That's where your middle name comes from? Ellie slipped the bracelet over her wrist, where it hung loosely. It's too big. You'll grow into it, Sarah promised. Your mommy would have inherited this when she grew up. Now it's yours. There was a small pocket watch that had belonged to James Bennett, their father. He would let us listen to it ticking when we couldn't sleep. Sarah remembered, holding it to Ellie's ear so she could hear the gentle rhythm dot at the bottom of the box lay. A faded blue baby blanket with Emma embroidered in one corner. This was your mommy's when she was a baby, Sarah said softly. I managed to keep it when we were separated. Ellie wrapped the soft fabric around her hand, bringing it to her cheek. It smells nice. Cedar from the box, Sarah explained. I've kept these things safe all these years, hoping someday I could share them with your mommy. Now I get to share them with you instead. Diane had been quiet throughout this exploration, but now she spoke up. I have some things of Catherine's as well, she said, rising from her chair. Things from her childhood with us. Maybe we could add them to this box, make it a complete history. It was a generous offer, an acknowledgement that Catherine's life had been shaped by both families. I think that would be wonderful, Sarah replied sincerely. Diane disappeared upstairs, returning with a small cardboard box. I've been saving these for Ellie when she's older. Together, they began integrating these new treasures, Catherine's. First drawing from kindergarten, a report card showing straight A's in art and English, a dried corsage from her high school prom. Look, Diane said suddenly, holding up a small journal. Catherine's diary from when she was 13. She wrote something interesting here. She opened to a page marked with a faded ribbon and read aloud. Sometimes I dream about a girl with blue eyes like mine. She's older than me and she's looking for something. I think maybe she's looking for me. Mom says it's just my imagination, but it feels so real. Like a memory I can't quite catch. Sarah's breath caught. She remembered. She whispered. Somehow, on some level, she remembered. I think she did, Diane agreed softly. There were always moments when Catherine seemed to be searching for something she couldn't name. Now I understand what it was. Ellie, who had been examining the report card, looked up. My mommy was looking for you, Aunt Sarah, just like you were looking for her. Yes, sweetheart, Sarah managed, her voice thick with emotion. We were looking for each other all along. By the time they finished exploring the combined treasures, the short winter day was fading into dusk. They placed everything carefully back into the cedar box, which now held the complete story of Catherine Emma, her beginnings as a Bennett, her life as a Parker, and most importantly, her legacy in Ellie. This is your history, Ellie, Sarah told her, closing the lid gently, both sides of it. And whenever you have questions about where you come from, you can look in here and remember how many people have loved you through the generations. Ellie placed her small hand on the carved lid. Can we put my pendant in here too, for safekeeping? That's a wonderful idea, Sarah agreed. And maybe someday my half can join it there too. As they sat together in the growing darkness, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm glow over them, Sarah felt a sense of completion she had never expected to find. The circle that had been broken 20 years ago was slowly being mended. Not in the way she had imagined, but in a way that felt right and true. January brought new challenges. What had begun as a personal revelation was evolving into legal considerations that neither Sarah nor Diane had fully anticipated. It started with a simple field trip permission form. Sarah had signed it automatically when Ellie handed it to her. During their Thursday dinner, not thinking twice about it, actually, Diane said gently when she picked Ellie up later that evening, I should be the one to sign school forms. I'm her legal guardian. Sarah had flushed with embarrassment. Of course, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. It's okay, Diane assured her. But it does bring up something we should probably discuss, the legal aspects of our situation. After Ellie was tucked into bed during their next Sunday visit, the two women sat at Diane's kitchen table with cups of tea, broaching the subject that had been hovering between them. I've been thinking, Diane began, about what happens if something were to happen to me. Legally speaking, you wouldn't have any rights regarding Ellie, despite being her biological aunt. It was something Sarah had considered but hadn't wanted to bring up, fearing it might seem like overstepping. I've thought about that too, she admitted. I think we should consult with a family law attorney, Diane suggested, to understand our options. Sarah nodded, relieved that Diane had been the one to raise the issue. I like that. Not because I'm trying to claim any authority, but because I want what's best for Ellie. I know, Diane said simply. That's why I trust you enough to have this conversation. It was a significant moment in their evolving relationship, an acknowledgement of mutual respect and shared purpose. The following week, they met with Angela Ramirez, a family law attorney recommended by one of Diane's colleagues. Her office was warm and inviting, with children's books and toys in one corner, a deliberate choice for a lawyer who specialized in family matters. So let me make sure I understand the situation, Angela said after they'd explained their circumstances. Ellie is the daughter of Catherine Parker, who was born as Emma Bennett, Sarah's biological sister. Catherine passed away 6 months ago, and Diane, as her cousin, is Ellie's legal guardian. That's correct, Diane confirmed. And now you want to explore options for formalizing Sarah's relationship with Ellie in some legal capacity? Yes, Diane nodded. I want to make sure that if something happened to me, Ellie would remain connected to her biological family through Sarah. Angela made some notes. There are several approaches we could take. The most straightforward would be to update your will, Diane, to name Sarah as Ellie's guardian in the event of your death or incapacity. I'd like to do that, Diane agreed immediately. Beyond that, Angela continued, we could look at establishing a more formal legal relationship now. Since Sarah is a biological relative, we could petition for a legal recognition of her status as Ellie's aunt, which would give her certain rights, the ability to make medical decisions in an emergency, for instance, or to pick Ellie up from school. Sarah listened carefully, aware of the delicate balance they were trying to achieve. I don't want to infringe on Diane's authority as Ellie's guardian, she emphasized. I just want to ensure that our family connection is legally acknowledged. What about shared guardianship? Diane asked unexpectedly. Is that possible? Both Sarah and Angela looked at her in surprise. It is possible, Angela confirmed. It would mean that both of you would have legal rights and responsibilities regarding Ellie. It's not common outside of divorcing parents, but there's precedent in situations involving blended families. Sarah was stunned by Diane's suggestion. Are you sure that's something you'd want to consider? She asked carefully. Diane met her gaze steadily. I've been thinking about it a lot. Ellie deserves to have both of us in her life, legally recognized. You're her blood relative, her connection to Catherine's origins. I'm her connection to the life Catherine built. Together, we give her a complete picture of where she comes from. It was perhaps the most generous offer Diane could have made, a willingness to share the legal responsibility she had shouldered alone since Catherine's death. I'm honored, Sarah said softly. Truly, Angela outlined the process for them. It would involve filing a petition with the family court, home visits from a court-appointed guardian ad litem to ensure the arrangement was in Ellie's best interests, and ultimately a hearing before a judge. It's not a quick process, she warned, and there will be scrutiny. The court's primary concern is always the welfare of the child, as it should be, Sarah agreed. Would Ellie need to appear in court? Diane asked, concern evident in her voice. Not necessarily, especially given her age, Angela explained. The guardian ad litem would interview her in a comfortable setting, assess her relationship with both of you, and make recommendations to the court. By the end of the consultation, they had a plan in place. Angela would prepare the necessary paperwork for Diane to update her will immediately, naming Sarah as Ellie's guardian should anything happen to Diane. Simultaneously, they would begin the process of petitioning for a shared guardianship arrangement. As they left the attorney's office, Sarah felt both overwhelmed and deeply moved by Diane's willingness to formalize their unconventional family structure. "Thank you," she said simply as they walked to their cars, "for being so generous with something so precious." Diane's expression was thoughtful. When Catherine was dying, she made me promise to always do what was best for Ellie. I think this is what she would have wanted for her daughter to have both parts of her family in her life. The legal process unfolded over the next several weeks. There were forms to complete, financial disclosures to prepare, and interviews with the guardian ad litem, a compassionate woman named Teresa who spoke with both women separately and together. "What strikes me," Teresa commented during their joint interview, "is how complementary your roles are in Ellie's life. You're not competing with each other, you're collaborating for her benefit. That's rare and valuable." The most challenging part was explaining the process to Ellie in age-appropriate terms. They decided to approach it simply. "Remember how we learned that families come in different shapes?" Diane began one evening with Sarah beside her on the couch and Ellie on the floor with her coloring books. Ellie nodded, still focused on her drawing. "Well, we're going to make our special family official. Aunt Sarah and I are going to talk to a judge who will say that we're both your family in a special legal way." Ellie looked up, considering this. "Will I still live here with you, Aunt Diane?" "Yes, absolutely," Diane assured her. "Nothing will change about where you live or your daily routine. This just makes it official that Aunt Sarah is part of our family too." This explanation seemed to satisfy Ellie, who returned to her coloring. With the matter settled in her mind, the court hearing was scheduled for early March. As they prepared for this final step in their legal journey, Sarah reflected on how far they had come in just a few months, from strangers connected by silver, pendant to a family united by love for one little girl. Christmas approached with a whirlwind of excitement. For Sarah, who had spent so many holidays alone or with friends, the prospect of a family Christmas, her family, was both thrilling and overwhelming. "Will you spend Christmas Day with us?" Diane asked during one of their Sunday visits in mid-December. "I think it would mean a lot to Ellie." Sarah had been hoping for such an invitation but hadn't wanted to presume. "I'd love to," she said warmly. "Thank you." "We should coordinate on gifts," Diane suggested practically, to avoid duplication or going overboard. This led to a pleasant conspiratorial session after Ellie had gone to bed, the two women comparing notes on what the child had mentioned wanting and what might be appropriate. Sarah was touched by Diane's inclusiveness, her willingness to make room for another adult in these parental decisions. "I thought I might get her a bird feeder for the backyard," Sarah suggested. "She loves watching birds, and it would be something we could do together when I visit." "That's perfect," Diane agreed. "I'm getting her a bicycle. She's outgrown her tricycle, and the neighbor kids all have bikes with training wheels." As they continued planning, Sarah noticed Diane seemed preoccupied. "Is everything all right?" she asked gently. Diane hesitated. It's just that this is our first Christmas without Catherine. I want it to be special for Ellie, but I'm afraid it might be harder than I'm anticipating. For both of you, Sarah acknowledged, reaching across the table to squeeze Diane's hand. What traditions did you have with Catherine? We always made gingerbread houses on Christmas Eve, Diane recalled, a sad smile playing at her lips. Catherine was terrible at it, her houses. Always collapsed, but she loved doing it anyway. Then we should definitely make gingerbread houses, Sarah declared, to honor her memory. Diane nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you for understanding. She was my sister, Sarah said simply. I miss her too, even though I never got to know. Her as Catherine. We're both grieving her, just in different ways. It was a moment of connection between them, a shared sorrow that somehow strengthened their evolving bond. In the days leading up to Christmas, Sarah found herself swept up in holiday preparations. She helped Diane string lights along the eaves of the house, laughing as they tangled themselves in wires and extension cords. She joined them for an evening of Christmas cookie baking, where Ellie proved to have inherited her mother's lack of culinary precision but abundance of enthusiasm. More sprinkles, Ellie declared, appending an entire bottle of red sugar onto a snowman cookie. Just like your mother, Diane laughed. Catherine never met a cookie she couldn't overload with decorations. These casual mentions of Catherine had become more frequent and natural, a way of keeping her memory alive for Ellie while acknowledging the grief they all carried. On Christmas Eve, Sarah arrived at Diane's house with arms full of packages and a bag of gingerbread house supplies. Ellie ran to greet her, already in Christmas pajamas despite it being only 4 in the afternoon. Aunt Sarah, come see our tree. I put the star on top all by myself. The house was transformed with holiday decorations, garlands along the staircase. Stockings hung from the mantel, including a new one with Aunt Sarah embroidered across the top, which brought tears to Sarah's eyes, and a tree glittering with a mix of store-bought ornaments and handmade creations. Ellie and I have a surprise for you, Diane announced once Sarah had deposited her packages under the tree. She handed Sarah a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a delicate glass ornament, a swallow in flight, painted in shades of blue. We thought it should go on the tree, Diane explained, to represent all of us, you, me, Ellie, and Catherine. The swallow that guided us home to each other. Touched beyond words, Sarah carefully hung the ornament on a prominent branch. The afternoon flowed into evening with the building of gingerbread houses, all of which partially collapsed, leading Diane to declare it a perfect Parker Bennett tradition, a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches, and the reading of "'Twas." The night before Christmas, with Ellie nestled between the two women on the couch. Do you think Santa will know I have 2 houses now? Ellie asked as they tucked her into bed. Your apartment and our house. Sonnet is very smart about these things, Sarah assured her. He always knows where children are. And Mommy? Ellie asked sleepily. Does she know where I am too? Diane met Sarah's eyes over Ellie's head. Yes, sweetheart, Diane said softly. Your mommy always knows exactly where you are. She's watching over you just like the swallows in the sky. After Ellie had fallen asleep, Sarah and Diane worked together to fill the stockings and arrange the presents. They sat together by the tree with glasses of wine, the house quiet around them. I never thought I'd be sharing Christmas like this, Diane admitted. When Catherine died, I was so afraid of being alone, of failing Ellie somehow. You could never fail her, Sarah said sincerely. You've given her so much stability and love. We both have, Diane replied, in different ways. She paused, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. I've been meaning to ask you, what are your thoughts about the future? Long term, I mean. Sarah considered the question carefully. I think we've created something special here, something that works for Ellie. I'd like to see it continue and grow, even if it means compromising on other aspects of your life, Diane pressed. Dating, career advancement, moving. Ellie comes first, Sarah said without hesitation. Finding this connection to Emma, it's what I've been searching for my whole adult life. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Diane seemed satisfied with this answer. Good, because I think we're doing something important here. Creating a new kind of family. Christmas morning arrived with Ellie bouncing on Sarah's air mattress at dawn, eager to see what Sana had brought. The day unfolded in a blur of torn wrapping paper, delighted exclamations, and the chaotic joy of a child at Christmas, the bird. Feeder was a hit, immediately installed outside the kitchen window so Ellie could watch for visitors while eating breakfast. The bicycle earned squeals of excitement and an immediate test ride up and down the hallway, with both women running alongside to prevent crashes in the afternoon. While Ellie napped, exhausted from the morning's excitement, Sarah and Diane exchanged their own gifts. Sarah had given Diane a beautiful leather-bound journal, remembering how Catherine had kept diaries as a teenager. For your memories of Ellie growing up, she explained. And maybe some memories of Catherine, too, that you could share with Ellie. Someday, Diane's gift to Sarah was a framed photograph one Sarah had never seen before. It showed Catherine at about 20, holding newborn Ellie in her arms, her face radiant with love and pride. I thought you should have this, Diane said softly. A picture of your sister as she was in her final years, happy, fulfilled, loved. Sarah traced her finger over the image of her sister's face, so grown up from the toddler she remembered, yet unmistakably Emma in her expressions and features. Thank you, she whispered. This means everything. As the day waned into evening, they gathered around the table for Christmas dinner. Diane had prepared a traditional feast, with Sarah contributing her mother's recipe for cranberry sauce, passed down through generations of Bennets. Before they began eating, Ellie announced solemnly, "We should say thank you for our family." Adults exchanged surprised glances, then nodded in agreement. I'm thankful for Aunt Diane and Sarah, Ellie declared, her small face serious, and for Mommy watching from heaven, and for Santa and presents and my new bike. I'm thankful for finding you, Ellie, Sarah added, her voice thick with emotion, and for your Aunt Diane, who opened her heart and home to make room for me in your life. And I'm thankful for second chances, Diane concluded, for the family we've built together and for the love that connects us all present and absent. As they ate and laughed and pulled crackers with paper crowns, Sarah realized they had created something unique and precious, a family formed not by conventional bonds, but by love, loss, and the miraculous connection of two silver pendants finding their way back to each other across 20 years of separation. Spring brought new beginnings for the unconventional family they had formed. In early March, Sarah and Diane appeared before family court judge Eleanor Simmons for their guardianship hearing. The courtroom was less intimidating than Sarah had feared, more like a conference room with wooden paneling and warm lighting. Teresa, the guardian ad litem, presented her findings to the judge. In my professional assessment, this arrangement serves Ellie's best interests extraordinarily well. She has formed a secure attachment to both Miss Parker and Miss Bennett, and their cooperative approach to parenting provides her with stability, continuity, and a rich connection to her family heritage on both sides. Judge Simmons asked thoughtful questions about their daily routines, how they handled disagreements, and their plans for Ellie's future. Sarah and Diane answered honestly, emphasizing their commitment to putting Ellie first in all decisions. In my 20 years on the bench, Judge Simmons said finally, I've seen many different family structures. What matters isn't the configuration, but the love, stability, and respect within the family unit. She signed the order with a flourish. I hereby grant joint legal guardianship to Diane Parker and Sarah Bennett, with physical custody remaining primarily with Miss Parker as established. Just like that, with the stroke of a pen, their arrangement became official in the eyes of the law. Sarah had legal standing as Ellie's guardian alongside Diane, not replacing her, but complementing her role in Ellie's life. They celebrated that evening with pizza and ice cream, explaining to Ellie in simple terms what had happened. "Remember how we talked about making our special family official?" Diane reminded her. "Well, today a judge said yes, we are officially a family." Ellie seemed to take this in stride, more interested in her pepperoni pizza than legal proceedings. But later, as Sarah was preparing to leave, the child wrapped her arms around her aunt's waist in a fierce hug. "I'm glad you're officially my aunt now," she said. "Even though you always were anyway?" Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Blinking back tears dot with the legal matters settled, Sarah approached Principal Martinez about returning to Ellie's classroom for the final month of school. "The guardianship is now legally established," she explained, "and I believe it would provide closure for both Ellie and the other children if I could finish out the year with them." Martinez considered the request. "Miss Chen has done well with Ellie's class," he noted, "but I understand your point about closure. Perhaps we could arrange a co-teaching situation for the remainder of the year. You and Miss Chen working together, with both classes for special projects and activities, while maintaining separate core instruction." It was a generous compromise. "That would be wonderful," Sarah agreed. When Sarah returned to Ellie's classroom for their first joint activity, a spring planting project combining both kindergarten classes, the children greeted her with excitement. "Miss Bennett is back," they cheered. Ellie, who had been briefed ahead of time about the arrangement, beamed with pride but maintained appropriate school behavior, raising her hand like the other students when she wanted to speak during recess. However, she sidled up to Sarah on the playground. "Are you my teacher again, or just my aunt at school now?" "A little bit of both," Sarah explained. "I'm helping with special activities for both classes, but Miss Chan is still your main teacher." Ellie considered this, her head tilted in that characteristic Bennett way. "That's good," she decided, "because sometimes the other kids didn't understand why you're my aunt and my teacher." "This is less confusing." Sarah marveled at the child's wisdom. "You're absolutely right, Ellie. It is less confusing this way." As May approached, bringing with it the end of the school year, preparations began for the kindergarten graduation ceremony. It was a beloved tradition at Oak Ridge, complete with tiny caps made from construction paper, diplomas rolled with ribbon, and a procession to pomp and circumstance. Played on the music teacher's keyboard. Sarah and Rebecca worked together to plan the event, combining their classes for rehearsals. Watching Ellie practice walking solemnly across the stage to receive her diploma, Sarah felt a surge of pride that transcended her role as a teacher. This was her niece, Emma's daughter, achieving this milestone. The day of the ceremony arrived. With perfect late spring weather, the multi-purpose room was transformed with streamers and balloons, rows of chairs set up for proud parents and family members. Sarah spotted Diane in the front row, saving a seat beside her with her purse. Behind the makeshift stage, Sarah helped the children line up in alphabetical order, straightening paper caps and reminding them of the procedures they had practiced. Ellie stood between Jason Owens and Maria Perez, practically vibrating with excitement. "Remember to walk slowly," Sarah reminded the group. "This is a very special day." As the music began and the children processed in, Sarah watched from the side of the stage where she would join Rebecca to hand out the diplomas. The ceremony was simple but moving, a celebration of the children's first year of formal education and their readiness to move forward. When Ellie's name was called, she walked confidently to center stage. Rebecca handed her the diploma, and Sarah placed the construction paper castle from right to left on her cap, just as they did for each child. But Ellie paused, breaking from the rehearsed procedure to throw her arms around Sarah in a quick hug before continuing to the other side of the stage. There was a ripple of awes from the audience, and Sarah caught Diane's eye in the front row. They shared a smile of understanding. This moment was special for all of them. After the ceremony, as families mingled during the punch and cookie reception, Ellie proudly introduced Sarah to several classmates' parents who hadn't met her before. "This is my Aunt Sarah," she declared to the Ramirez family. "She's my mommy's sister, but we just found each other this year because my mommy was adopted when she was little. Now we're officially a family because the judge said so." Mrs. Ramirez looked slightly bewildered by this concise summary of their complex situation, but smiled politely. "How wonderful for you both." Diane joined them, placing a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder. "Perhaps a bit less detail for casual conversation, sweetheart," she suggested with good humor. "But it's our story," Ellie protested, "and it's special." "It is indeed," Sarah agreed, exchanging an amused glance with Diane. "Very special." As the reception wound down and families began to leave, Principal Martinez approached Sarah. "Have you made a decision about next year?" he asked. "Will you be taking a new kindergarten class or moving to another position?" Sarah had been considering this question for months. "I'd like to try something new," she said finally. "I've been thinking about the reading specialist position that's opening. I believe my experience with early literacy would be valuable there." Martinez nodded approvingly. "I think that would be an excellent fit for your skills." And it would. Avoid any potential conflicts with Ellie moving to first grade. "My thoughts exactly," Sarah agreed. "It feels like the right next step." As she watched Ellie skipping ahead of Diane toward the parking lot, her diploma clutched proudly in one hand, Sarah felt a sense of completion. The school year that had begun with the shocking recognition of a silver pendant was ending with new possibilities, new connections, and a family pieced together from fragments of the past and present. The first day of summer vacation dawned bright and full of promise. Sarah arrived at Diane's house early, a picnic basket in one hand and a small duffel bag in the other. "Are we ready for our adventure?" she called as Ellie flung open the door before she could knock. "Yes, I've been packed since forever," Ellie declared, dragging a tiny rolling suitcase behind her. "Aunt Diane said I could bring 2 stuffed animals, but I couldn't decide, so I brought 3. Is that okay?" "Absolutely," Sarah laughed. "The more the merrier." This day marked a significant milestone for their evolving family, their first overnight trip together. After much discussion, they had decided on a simple weekend at a lakeside cabin about 2 hours away. A gentle introduction to traveling as a unit. Diane appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand. "I think we're all set. Did you remember the sunscreen, Sarah?" "SPF 50, waterproof, and I packed extra," Sarah confirmed, lifting her duffel bag. "And the bird identification guide for our nature walk." They had fallen easily into complementary roles, Diane handling logistics and practical needs, Sarah bringing elements of education and adventure. Together, they created a balance that seemed to work well for Ellie. The drive to the lake passed pleasantly, with Ellie chattering from the back seat about all the activities she was looking forward to: swimming, roasting marshmallows, looking for frogs. Sarah and Diane took turns responding to her excitement, occasionally catching each other's eye with amused glances. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms and a stone fireplace in the living area. Ellie immediately claimed that room with bunk beds, arranging her stuffed animals on the top bunk while she took the bottom. After lunch, they headed to the lake. Ellie, wearing arm floaties and a determined expression, waded cautiously into the water with Diane, while Sarah set up their beach umbrella and chairs. Watching them from the shore, Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for how far they had come in. Just 7 months. From strangers connected by a silver pendant to a family taking their first vacation together, it seemed miraculous. Later that afternoon, Sarah took Ellie on the promised nature walk while Diane prepared dinner at the cabin. Armed with the bird guide and a small notebook for recording their discoveries, they followed a gentle trail around the lake. "Look, Aunt Sarah," Ellie exclaimed, pointing to a flash of blue among the trees. "Is that a swallow?" Sarah focused her gaze where Ellie was pointing. "It's a blue jay, actually. See the crest on its head? Swallows are smaller and have more slender wings." Ellie nodded seriously, adding this information to her growing knowledge of birds. "Do you think we'll see a real swallow sometime?" "I'm sure we will," Sarah assured her. "They often fly near water, so this lake is a perfect place to look." "I want to see one because of our necklaces," Ellie explained, touching the pendant that hung around her neck. She wore it less often now that it spent most nights in the memory box, but she had insisted on bringing it for their special trip. "The swallow that guided us home to each other," Sarah remembered, echoing Diane's Christmas description. "Exactly," Ellie nodded. "Aunt Diane says it's like the universe was helping us find each other, like in a fairy tale." Sarah smiled at this. Characterization: your Aunt Diane is very wise. As they continued along the path, Ellie grew quiet, an unusual state for the normally chatty child. "Aunt Sarah," she said finally, "can I ask you something about my mommy?" "Of course, sweetheart, anything." "Did she know about you? That you were looking for her?" It was a profound question, one that Sarah had pondered herself. "I don't think." "She knew specifically about me," she answered honestly. "But from what Aunt Diane shared from her diaries, I think she felt that there was someone out there connected to her. She had dreams about a girl with blue eyes like hers who was searching for something." "For her," Ellie supplied. "Yes, for her. For your mommy. And even though I didn't find her in time, I found you instead." Ellie considered this, her small face solemn. "I think she would be happy about that." "I think so too," Sarah agreed, her throat tight with emotion. When they returned to the cabin, they found Diane had prepared a feast of hot dogs, corn on the cob, and watermelon, perfect summer foods for their first vacation dinner. As they ate on the cabin's green porch, Sarah shared the highlights of their nature walk. "We saw 7 different kinds of birds," she reported. Ellie drew pictures of each one in her notebook. "No swallows yet?" Ellie added. "But we're still looking." After dinner came the promised marshmallow roasting around the fire pit behind the cabin. Ellie proved to have inherited her mother's lack of patience, repeatedly setting her marshmallows aflame before yanking them from the fire, charred and smoking. "Just like Catherine," Diane laughed. "She could never wait for the perfect golden brown. It was always charcoal or nothing." "I like them burnt," Ellie declared, peeling off the blackened exterior to reveal the gooey center. These casual mentions of Catherine had become common, a way of keeping her memory alive for Ellie. Both women made a point of sharing stories and similarities they noticed, ensuring that Ellie's connection to her mother remained strong. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Ellie's energy finally began to wane. "Time for bed, I think," Diane suggested, noting the child's drooping eyelids. "But it's still fun time," Ellie protested weakly, even as she leaned against Sarah's side. "The lake will still be here tomorrow," Sarah promised. "And we have a whole day of adventures ahead." Bedtime routines had been established over months of Sunday stays and Thursday dinners. Diane handled teeth brushing and pajamas, while Sarah was in charge of the bedtime story. Tonight, settled on the lower bunk with Ellie tucked against her side, Sarah chose a story about a family of birds building a nest together. Different kinds of birds can make a family. Ellie asked sleepily as the story concluded. All kinds of combinations can make a family, Sarah confirmed. What matters is that they take care of each other and love each other. Like us, Ellie murmured, her eyes drifting closed. A blue jay, a cardinal, and a baby swallow. Sarah smiled at the bird analogy, exactly like us. After Ellie had fallen asleep, Sarah joined Diane on the cabin's porch. The night was peaceful, crickets chirping and the occasional splash from the lake, the only sounds breaking the silence. She called us a family of birds, Sarah shared, accepting the glass of wine Diane offered. A blue jay, a cardinal, and a baby swallow. Diane chuckled. She's been very into categorizing things lately. Everything has to fit into a system. It's a good system, Sarah observed. Different species finding a way to nest together. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their wine and listening to the night sounds. I've been thinking, Diane said finally, about living arrangements. Sarah turned to her questioningly. Your apartment lease is up in August, right? When Sarah nodded, Diane continued. What would you think about looking for a place closer to us? Not moving in, I think we all need our own space, but somewhere within a few blocks, maybe? It was something Sarah had considered but hadn't wanted to suggest, not wanting to seem presumptuous. I'd like that very much, she said sincerely. Being closer would make our regular visits easier, and I'd be available more readily if you needed backup with Ellie. Exactly, Diane nodded. And it would give you more private space than the pull-out couch for overnight stays. As they continued discussing the practicalities, Sarah marveled at how far they had come from the tension of their early interactions to this easy planning of a future in closer proximity. It wasn't a conventional family structure, but it was working for all of them. 1 year later, on a crisp September morning, Sarah stood in her new kitchen, preparing lunch for Ellie's first day of first grade. The apartment she had found was just 3 blocks from Diane's house, close enough for easy visits, but maintaining the separate spaces they all needed. The past year had brought many changes. Sarah had thrived in her new position as Oak Ridge's reading specialist, working with small groups of students who needed extra support. Diane had received a promotion at the accounting firm where she worked, which came with more flexibility for family time. And Ellie had grown 1.5 inches, lost 2 teeth, and developed an even deeper passion for birds. Now keeping a detailed journal of every species she spotted, their family structure had evolved too. What had begun as designated visits Sunday, afternoons and Thursday dinners had naturally expanded into a more fluid arrangement. Sarah often picked Ellie up from after-school care when Diane worked late. Diane would drop by Sarah's apartment on weekends for coffee while Ellie played. In the small community garden Sarah had helped establish in their apartment complex, they still maintained certain traditions. Sunday dinners remained sacred family time, but the boundaries between their lives had softened, creating a rhythm that felt natural and supportive. For all of them, do you think Miss Jimenez will be nice? Ellie asked, watching Sarah pack apple slices into a container. I've heard wonderful things about her, Sarah assured her. And first grade is going to be exciting. You'll learn so many new things. Like bigger books and real science, Ellie nodded, having clearly discussed this with her friends. And Zoe from my kindergarten class will be there too. Diane arrived to pick them up, dressed for work in a sleek pantsuit. The 3 of them had decided to all go together for this important first day, with Sarah planning to slip away to her own classroom after seeing Ellie settled. Ready for the big day first? Grader? Diane asked, dropping a kiss on Ellie's head. Ready? Ellie declared, shouldering her new backpack blue with swallows embroidered along the straps. A special find from a local artisan shop at school. They joined the stream of families escorting children to their classrooms. Several parents greeted. Sarah warmly, accustomed now to her dual role as a staff member and Ellie's aunt. The unusual family arrangement had been a topic of curiosity initially, but the Oak Ridge community had ultimately embraced their story. Miss Jimenez welcomed Ellie at the classroom door, kneeling to introduce herself at the child's level. "I've heard so many wonderful things about you, Ellie," she said warmly. "Miss Bennett and Miss Chen told me what an amazing reader and artist you are." Ellie beamed at this reception, any nervousness forgotten. She gave both her aunts quick hugs before confidently entering the classroom to find her assigned desk. "She'd be fine," Sarah reassured Diane, seeing her blink back tears. "And we'll both be right here in the building if she needs anything." After Diane had left for work and Sarah had prepared her materials for the day's reading groups, she found herself drawn to the small garden area behind the school. It was a quiet spot, rarely visited during the morning rush. With benches nestled among flowering bushes, Sarah sat on a bench, feeling the weight of the past year, all the changes, all the growth, all the healing. From her purse, she removed a small velvet pouch. Inside was her half of the silver pendant, the one she had worn faithfully for 20 years, while searching for Emma Dot since finding Ellie. Since confirming that Catherine Parker had indeed been her lost sister Emma, Sarah had worn the pendant less frequently. It had served its purpose, guiding her home to family as the swallow symbolized. Now it spent most days in the cedar memory box alongside Ellie's half, a complete story rather than a fragmented hope dot, but today felt significant, a full circle moment that called for acknowledgement. Sarah wasn't sure if she believed in an afterlife, in the possibility that Emma Catherine might somehow be aware of how things had unfolded. But sitting in the quiet garden with the morning sun warming her face, Sarah felt a deep sense of completion, of promises fulfilled. "We found our way back to each other, Emma," she whispered to the pendant cradled in her palm. "Through Ellie. And she's so much like you, curious, creative, full of life. She has your eyes, your laugh, even that little head tilt when she's thinking hard about something." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and Sarah continued her one-sided conversation. "Diane has been remarkable. I never expected we would become such good partners in raising Ellie, but somehow it works. Different perspectives, different strengths, but the same goal, giving Ellie the most loving, stable life possible." She paused, running her finger over the jagged edge of the half-heart. "I wish you could see her growing up. I wish we could have found each other while you were still here. But I promise you, Emma, I will make sure she always knows where she comes from, both sides of her story, both branches of her family tree." As if in response to her words, a small bird landed on the branch above her, a barn swallow with sleek blue-black wings and a rusty throat. It regarded her curiously for a moment before taking flight again, swooping in a graceful arc over the garden. Sarah smiled at the timing, at the perfect symmetry of the moment. Whether coincidence or something more, it felt right a sign that the circle was complete. Later that afternoon, she met Ellie and Diane at the school gates. Ellie bounded toward them, full of stories about her first day, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. "And Miss Jimenez said we're going to have a special project about families. We can bring pictures and tell our stories and everything." "That sounds wonderful," Diane smiled. "You certainly have an interesting story to tell." "The best story," Ellie declared with absolute conviction. "How my two aunts found each other because of matching necklaces from my mommy." "Speaking of the necklaces," Sarah said, removing the velvet pouch from her purse, "I was thinking it might be time to do something special with them." That evening, the three of them sat at Diane's kitchen table with the two halves of the silver pendant placed side by side. "They've been apart for so long," Sarah explained to Ellie. "I thought maybe we could find a way to put them back together, to make them whole again." Ellie's eyes widened. "Can we really do that?" "I've spoken to a jeweler," Diane confirmed. She says she can solder them together and reinforce the join with additional silver. It won't be perfect. There will always be a line where they were broken, but they'll be one piece again. Just like our family, Ellie observed with the simple wisdom that often took Sarah's breath away. Put back together, but still with lines showing where we were broken. Exactly like our family, Sarah agreed, meeting Diane's eyes over Ellie's head. 1 year from the day that Sarah had first noticed the silver pendant hanging around Ellie's neck in morning circle time, they stood together in a small jewelry shop. The jeweler, a woman with kind eyes and skilled hands, presented them with the repaired pendant on a new, stronger chain. The two halves were joined again, the swallow design complete across the restored heart. As promised, a thin line remained visible where the break had been, but the pendant was whole again, stronger at the mended place than it had been before. Who wants to wear it first? Diane asked as the jeweler placed the pendant in a velvet-lined box. All of us together, Ellie decided. That's how we do everything important. So the three of them, this unlikely, unconventional, unbreakable family, reached out together and touched the silver heart with its flying swallow, a symbol of their journey home to each other. Like and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories of lost connections and second chances, Sarah whispered with a smile, echoing the call to action they now added to the end of the bedtime stories they created together. Share your own experiences with unexpected reunions in the comments below. We'd love to hear how fate brought someone special back into your life. Ellie giggled at their private joke, and Diane shook her head in amused exasperation. The pendant gleamed in its box, whole again after 20 years, just like the family it had guided back together.